Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Paul Watson. Paul is principal of Emmanuel Catholic College in Western Australia. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Thank you, Jonno. I'm very pleased for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our chat. I guess, first of all, can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do as principal of Emmanuel Catholic College?
Yeah, certainly. So we're a large Catholic college in the southern suburbs of Perth with about 1,180 students at the moment. It's a fast growing school in a very new and upcoming area, so the demand for education in this demographic is actually quite strong. I think my role's probably twofold in a lot of ways because of the operation nature of the school. I manage a large staff, in excess of about 118 all up, 83 of those being teachers. And of course, with 1,180 kids, then that's been, a rather large responsibility to a very, very big community with the associated 800, 900 plus families involved in the college as well. So there's that element of leadership that is very operational and it's very management based, but there's a large part of it, especially in regards to my passion and my belief, that is transformational. My goal is to work towards redefining education, to move away from the more traditional systems that we've known for so long, to better engage our students and inspire them. And in doing so, a really big part of that is to encourage my staff to innovate, to be creative, to do things differently. And for what it's worth, I give them permission to fail in doing so, in order to take a little bit of the pressure that they might feel of having to get things right every minute of the day. So I think that's, in short, pretty much what I'm about and what I do.
Wonderful. Thank you for unpacking that. And let's hear a bit of your story. So to start off, I'd love to go back to your childhood, back to growing up. Are there any moments from that season or themes that have really shaped you becoming the person and the leader you are today, Paul?
Yeah, sure. Look, when I think about that, I can't really think of any defining moment or any defining experience. I think it's been something that's been amassed over years. And when I go back to my childhood, I grew up in the country. It was a very, very strong community feel. I was brought up to have strong values. And I think the importance of treating others really well was placed upon me at an early age, and it's something that I haven't let go of. And I think that that's remained at the forefront in all that I do, certainly in my current leadership as well. I've moved around a lot. I've experienced different communities in different contexts, from regional to city, and very, very different clienteles. And I think that those different experiences and the different people that you meet and come into contact along the way have also had a profound impact in the leader that I've become today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I'd love to know, for you, when was your first leadership opportunity? Do you remember the first time you had responsibility for the vision of a project or a group of people? You were managing people in some sense. It might have been when you were little and young. It might have been a bit older. What comes to mind, Paul?
Yeah, look, probably my first teaching experience, or my second year out teaching, I found myself in a country town in northwestern WA, and those opportunities gratefully present themselves very, very early in country towns, and you have to pick up these leadership roles because you're responsible for a multitude of things on a small staff, and it becomes a really steep learning curve at such an early age. And I think I picked up my first acting deputy principal at the age of about 27, after dipping my toe in various leadership roles within that school prior to that. So very, very young, didn't have a lot of experience in terms of leadership training, and had to rely on, I think, a degree of innateness as well to be able to perform some of those roles well. It's a matter, for me, of being in the right time at the right place. And then it sort of extended even into that town to being approached, and gratefully so, undertaking leadership positions in sports clubs at a very young age as well. And I needed to accept the responsibility of that, and in doing so ensure that I could do the job as well as I could. And I think that being not thrust into it, but feeling like that in some ways really prepared me for a reality that probably wasn't on my radar. And I came to realise very early that when we sit back and we look at a variety of leadership roles, we don't really know what they entail until we actually start doing them. And it's easy to have an opinion until you find yourself in the actual role. And that was a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah, I agree. Same for me. What were your biggest lessons learned in those times, in your first teaching role and in opportunities within sporting clubs? What were the big lessons you learned?
Look, I think I needed to realise the necessity that leadership wasn't autocratic and that it couldn't be transactional. And when we go back, nearly 30 years now, there was a sense in leadership styles that's what it was supposed to be. It was largely managerial. You needed to make sure that certain things were achieved and that they were achieved in a certain way. And I think the people aspect of it was a little bit lacking. And I think that transition to a more nuanced style of leadership is something I've learnt the necessity of over time. And I remember when I first did an acting stint, a principal at the time said to me, "Paul, you have to make a decision about whether you want to be a leader." And I think that comes down to trying to decide, do you want to be one of those people that's got an opinion, that sits back and is very, very happy to tell everybody else how something should be done, and in some ways whinge about it to a degree? Or do you want to be a person that influences those decisions? And I think that was quite a defining moment in my career, to the point where I had a realisation, or I had some decisions to make around whether I actually wanted a title or I really wanted to do the job. And that's a bit of a line that I stick with now in looking at younger staff that might have leadership aspirations, is it comes simply down to that. Do you want the title, or do you actually want to do and undertake the role?
Yeah.
I think...
I was just going to say,
on top of that...
I was going to say, I think some young leaders don't know the difference as well. So I think that's a really helpful question to ask, because some people go, "Oh, what do you mean?" And sometimes you're helping someone realise. Patrick Lencioni's got a great book called The Motive, which is about why we lead. And I think we, sometimes just helping facilitate that thinking for young people, that thought process to actually go, why do I want this? And otherwise, like you described, definitely my experience was you can end up in a role and going, oh, okay, this is not what I thought it was about, and then you're in the deep end in some ways.
Yeah, most definitely. And look, I think some people get a dose of reality, and sometimes that sounds like it has negative connotations, and it's not always the case. But they persist too, for the wrong reasons. And I think that under those circumstances, it's going to take a personal toll on your health and well-being very, very quickly. Leadership needs passion. You have to believe in what you're doing. So it has to be the job, and not the title. And the title won't bring you respect in time. It's your actions that will. And it's not difficult, and it's difficult for people to get past a pay rise, possibly. A perception of increased power. And if that's all we're looking at, then we're definitely heading down the wrong pathway.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm interested to know, in your career so far, are there any aha moments that come to mind? Those sort of tipping point or even turning point moments where the penny drops, where you go through something, either watching another leader with how they lead or navigating it yourself, and there's a lesson that really gets burned into your memory and becomes part of who you are. Are there any sort of aha moments like that come to mind, Paul?
Yeah, look, yeah, in some ways there are. I think that it's at some point, even though you're not comfortable with it, you have to recognise some of the negative experiences that leadership just bring with it naturally. If you care, then there's going to be things that you lose sleep over, um, and I think I've almost come to accept that. When it used to happen, it's not a great feeling, and you'd think, how am I going to deal with that? But then I sort of reconciled with myself, well, that it means you care. And you're thinking about it very, very carefully, and not rushing anything. And I think I remember one former leader who I'd never worked with, but he'd been a leader in the system for quite a while, said to me that, you get people that walk into your office and they ask you a question and they want a decision straight away. And it's what he used to say, and it's a story that he used to tell, was that I would refuse. And when they got a bit upset about that, he'd sort of explain to them, well, hang on a minute. You've probably been thinking for weeks, if not months, how you're going to approach this with me. You've taken plenty of time to work out what you're going to say, how you're going to say it. I think it's a little bit unfair for you then to come to me and expect an answer on the spot. And I remember him saying that, and it was really an aha moment that, you don't have to do that. You have the right to step back, to give something due consideration. And that's probably something I've hung on to for nearly over 20 years now. And I often wonder whether I would have reached that conclusion myself had someone not told it to me. And I think the other ha-ha moment, be it positive or negative, is there came a point in my career where I realised that there is as much to learn from bad leadership as there is to learn from good. And how bad leadership can make an individual feel, and how it can devalue them, and the effect or the negative effect that some actions can have on a person. I learnt so much from seeing some of those and experiencing some of those things, that you almost define yourself to not want to be like that. So rather than just being focused on, the great leaders that we see, sometimes we need to look back at the things that went wrong, and decide whether it fits us as a person as well.
Oh, I completely agree. And, it's hard in those moments, and it's hard to coach someone in those moments because you don't want to come off as saying, you're going to really appreciate this horrible thing that you're in the middle of one
Yes.
day. So you can't necessarily say
That's
that, but it is
exactly
true.
right.
It is true on the other side, down the track. I've found for me, and definitely, nearly every leader I talk to, when you ask what's been most formative, it is often those painful things that you are part of with another leader, and you learn in those moments.
Absolutely.
I will never do this, because you gain that empathy to go, oh wow, this is bad.
Most definitely, and you can see what a negative impact it can have on a school. Obviously, being my context, I'm sure it extends elsewhere, an organisation and an overall culture. And sometimes the damage can be done so very, very quickly, and it can destroy years of good work. And unfortunately, it takes years sometimes to rebuild. And that's just, things shouldn't be that devastating, quite frankly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of my favourite illustrations about leadership is in a book by Dr. Henry Cloud. It's called Integrity, and it's a really interesting take on the word integrity and what it means. But he uses this metaphor of leadership being like a boat that has a wake behind it, and he says the wake that is behind a leader is that sort of like the boat that has all this choppy water behind it. And the big question for leaders is how do we minimize that? What are your thoughts on how to minimize wake behind us, negative wake?
I think that reputation is everything, and I think that we've got to have a realisation of what is the effect our actions can have. And we've got to have the ability to look past the short-term effect, and to say that, all right, this might be the immediate outcome of this action or my leadership, but what might it spiral off into? What could this mean for people outside the immediate group that I'm dealing with? What could this mean for the organisation maybe 6 months from now? Also got to have that ability that, especially in a school setting, that we follow compliance. Some of these things are non-negotiable, and they're non-negotiable for a reason. So we don't have the right, I don't believe, to step outside some of those things either. And I think that if we can do those two things, then we might not get it right. But, to use the analogy you just spoke about, we certainly get rid of that negative wake and that choppy wake. We have to have a realisation too that if that's the reputation we're leaving behind us is a choppy wake, then like most people, we will do what we can to avoid it.
Yeah, that's so true. So I'm interested to know, along the way in your career, are there any leaders you've already mentioned? You might have already referred to some of them, but any great leaders that you've watched and mentors that have taught you a lot?
Yeah, look, most definitely two. And interestingly enough, certainly one in coming to a large school in a city for the first time was quite outstanding. Had a great deal of experience, highly respected, had a great deal of knowledge to give, and viewed part of his role as succession leadership and the imperative nature of it. So he always made sure that those younger leaders underneath his leadership were gaining the skills, were gaining the knowledge that they needed. And in doing so, he was very, very open, and he was very, very honest sometimes in his feedback. And he never underestimated, the power of mentorship and the need to be transparent, I think, too. And that you can get up and that you can say to people, this is the outcome, and know that they're not going to agree with it, but you have to be prepared to explain it as well. And some people still might not agree with you, but they will understand your reasoning and they will respect that. I think the other person too, in terms of a female principal I worked with who was outstanding, and I've worked with this person as an equal deputy at another school some years before. To work with someone that you're actually quite close with, but to acknowledge that they are still the boss and that they are still the leader, is quite a special experience in a lot of ways, because there's a closeness of relationship that needs to exist there. They, as a leader, need your support. They need someone to vent with. They need someone to want to explain some of their thinking to and ask for your opinion on it. And that level of trust and confidence that a leader can place in another leader, even though not at the same level, can be quite transforming. And I think you can look at other people's leadership journeys too. You can understand the difficulties that they've had. You can understand and learn from what they learnt at the time. And that's probably one of the best working relationships I've ever had, actually, and it still exists, albeit slightly different today. So I think they're my two favourite examples, because they've had the most profound impact on me. And, I work with these people in some version or another as long as 15 years ago. And I still work with them now in some version or another.
Yeah, that's incredible. Are there any stories that come to mind from either of those leaders that really, I guess, are good representations of some of the things you said? Any specific moments that come to mind with how they dealt with a situation or managed people or a crisis or dealing with students? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, look, a crisis, and especially with students, is a very difficult thing for schools to deal with, especially if it involves a lot of emotion from various members of the community, and you're dealing with children that can struggle greatly during times of crisis. So, I think if I sort of give you a generic example, it's about being prepared before a crisis. What are we actually going to do if we're placed in some very, very difficult circumstances, and what roles are people going to take, and who's going to be responsible for what, and laying that out on the table well and truly before. And a crisis needs a proactive approach, so that we can, when we need to, bring in a reactive approach. It's actually tempered and it's actually been thought out. I think in those cases that, you've got to be authentic. When people are struggling, you can't pretend that maybe you're not. You have to be a little bit stronger than the others, most definitely, because you're the leader. But I think it's good for people to see that we're human beings too, that we're authentic in our care, but that we have the skills and knowledge to lead a school community or any organisation at this time through this crisis in a meaningful, authentic, pastoral way. And I've seen that enacted on more occasions than I wish, if I'm honest, but it's there. And I really believe that's probably some of the most important learnings, is you got to watch a person in action. In this case, it's been a specific example of crisis, but you've got to sit back and reflect on what these people are doing and why they've done it, if you want to learn from their leadership as well.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. Really good thoughts. Well, let's jump into Leadership Express. I want to ask you a few of these questions. The first one is, what's a book that you've gifted to other people?
Do you know what? I don't think I could come up with one. And I gave that a great deal of thought. What I do is head more down professionally in terms of the articles. I tend to very rarely read leadership books. Largely it's time, and if I'm honest, I get a little bit bored. They're full of gold, don't get me wrong. So I tend to concentrate on LinkedIn, if I'm perfectly honest. And if I see something there in short form... Sorry, I just had a bit of a sound issue there. If I see something in short form, then I might look at it. And certainly my role as a leader and even as a vice principal in encouraging, change in schools, I pretty much pick stuff up from the internet or YouTube, send it to staff once a week. It's up to them whether they read it or they don't, but the opportunity's certainly there. And the rule I have is that it can't take 10 minutes or more to watch or to read. So it's short and it's sharp and it's meaningful. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Do you have any favourite authors or anyone you follow on LinkedIn who you find, or YouTube, that you are sharing clips or short things that they've written multiple times?
Yeah, look, I follow Will Richardson a lot out of the US, and his big push for educational change, particularly in the light of a global pandemic, and the need not to return to what we thought was normal schooling, that he views the pandemic as an opportunity, albeit a crisis. It's an opportunity for us to redefine our schools. I follow Michael Fullan, and recently read, 18 months ago probably, his book Nuance, about changing leadership in a changing world. But there's a multitude of people through LinkedIn and YouTube, and the Dylan Williams of the world, and the Rita Pearsons, that have so much to offer educators. and so, obviously some of their clips have become quite, almost iconic, but probably none more so than Sir Ken Robinson around education, and that's probably 15 years ago in terms of developing a passion for changing it. He's probably the man that started it, and his work, and in particular his video around whether or not schools are killing creativity. And one other that's completely out of the normal book is a guy called Sully Breaks, who's a spoken word artist. And through his work on YouTube, he addresses things, like why I hate school but love education, and topics like we won't let exam results define our fate. Very different way to express an opinion, but I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, so next question I have for you, Paul, is what's a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of?
Yesterday, recent enough for you? I had a bit of an incident yesterday which reminded me of the need to stay calm. And something had irritated me, and I knew what I wanted to do, but I was, I guess, confident enough to know that that wasn't the time to make a decision because I wasn't in a good mood about it. And I thought it would probably be all right, but I decided to give myself time until this morning. I told my executive team to consider it and then have a discussion about it, because I couldn't 100% guarantee that they were going to get a rational response yesterday in terms of what the decision was that we had to make. So, that importance to take the time when needed, to reflect on what you're doing and to recognise you might not be in the best headspace at the time to make a decision that was going to permeate throughout the college. So as it was, this morning we met, we talked through it. We've gone with exactly what I thought yesterday. That didn't change. But I felt much more comfortable with the decision this morning than I would have been if I'd made it yesterday.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a great thought. Do you have any favourite questions when you're in a classroom with students, when you're with your leadership team or with parents, stakeholders? Any favourite questions you like to ask?
Yeah, look, there's a couple. I think, being new to a school this year, I take the opportunity to get out in the yard and speak to the kids. And my question to them has been numerous. I would have asked this question 100 times in the last 6 weeks. What's good about this school? But I always follow it up with what needs to change, do you think? What needs to shift? So I don't, and I'm honest and I'm genuine that I ask those questions because I want to get the answers. But two, I'm also, I've got so much time and respect for our teenagers that if you give them the opportunity, they will surprise you. And just to be able to listen to how well some articulate answers to those questions is quite outstanding. I made an effort, being new to this school, to offer the opportunity to meet with every staff member individually. With our COVID restrictions in Western Australia, I found that to be really important because I haven't had the opportunity since the first day of school to even address the whole staff as a group face to face. So, I've been here 7-8 weeks now, and there's people I haven't seen other than online. So that's made leadership difficult. But if I do meet with them one-on-one, I always ask them, what would you like the future to hold for you? So a big part of my leadership has to be, look, in some cases it could be succession leadership, but it's really, really important that I know what people that work here want for the future. And where possible, they need to know that they have my support in achieving that. That might not always be the outcome, but certainly the support is imperative. and the fact that they know that is imperative as well. And hopefully, in some instances, I can contribute to that, and I can point them in the right direction to maybe that they might be able to enhance to where that goal actually hopefully one day becomes a reality.
Yeah, I love that. Great thoughts. What's a commonly held belief in education that you passionately disagree with?
There's a lot. I think one of the things is the benefits of standardised testing for the benefit of students. I just don't believe that to be true. And I think it's more detrimental to put students through standardised testing to achieve very little more than government data. I think it's important to be data informed, but not data driven. And I think that there's quite some opposing schools of thoughts around that idea. And linked to that is a mandated curriculum. I think that it causes more trouble than it's worth, and I think we're teaching kids in a way and information for a world that just doesn't exist anymore. And our challenge is to inspire and to engage kids, I think, today, despite the fact that there's a mandated curriculum overshadowing us. I think we need to flip the education system on its head, move away from content first, where kids regurgitate and memorise things, and move to skill first to gain the content later.
Well, I agree with you, and I think you're right. I think how to do that is a big challenge. So it's, but I agree with the thought.
Yep.
Brilliant. What about a piece of great advice you've received at some point? Doesn't have to be leadership, could just be about life. At any point in your career, when you're growing up, recently, what's a great piece of advice you've received?
Yeah. I think it is, in essence, around leadership in education. And I was told many years ago, and it wasn't necessarily directed at me, but that belief that the most important thing for you to do is to do the best job you can in the job that you're doing now. That if your eye's too much on the next step and where you think you want to go in the future, then you're probably not going to go there, because at the end of the day you will be judged on the job that you're employed to do at the time.
Yeah, that's good. I really like that. Well said. Now, this could be a book, but I always love to ask if there are any movies, TV shows that really impacted you. Anything that comes to mind, a movie or TV show? It doesn't have to be serious. It could be something you just really enjoyed switching off and watching.
Yeah, look, well, some people might say this is inappropriate, but I think, in recent years, my favourite TV show has been Animal Kingdom on Netflix.
Yes, it's Australian, isn't it?
It's based, the US series that I've been watching on Netflix is based on an Australian movie.
Based on the Australian movie, yeah.
But it's very raw, and it's very gritty, and I think when you have actors in it, like Ellen Birkin, for example, that is so good at what she's doing, it's disconcerting to watch. It makes you feel uncomfortable. But I think those aspects of and a little similar to Yellowstone that I've been watching as well. There's a character in that is similar, but I think that it's reasonable entertainment. It presents a reality of a world that I might not be part of, but that for others exists. And I think in some ways, apart from the entertainment value, it's good for us to acknowledge that and to at least consider that, the struggles that people face in their lives are very varied, and sometimes in our environment we're very sheltered, and we have a tendency to sometimes maybe forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so true. Okay, last question, and that was a great recommendation. I enjoy all sorts of different recommendations, so that's Animal Kingdom, good one. If you could, if you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
Be yourself, be authentic, and then if you've got those leadership skills, they'll serve you well. But I don't think you can pretend to be anybody that you are not. You might get away with it for a little bit of time, but you won't get away with it for very long, and it will have a highly detrimental effect on you as an individual if that is what you are trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so true. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. For those who want to find out more about your school and also maybe connect with you online, say on LinkedIn, is LinkedIn the best way? And where can people find out about the school as well?
Yep, probably the Emmanuel Catholic College website is the best in regards to the school. Although we do have social media platforms elsewhere. Me personally, and I do try to separate my leadership beliefs and some of the writing that I've done around education from the position I have in a school. LinkedIn is most definitely the best place, and even some of the work I've done in magazines and international conferences is available through there as well.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in, and I know you would have enjoyed today's episode with Paul. It's been really fun to chat and hear stories and thoughts on leadership. Don't forget, for our listeners, I also have the Jonno White Leadership Podcast and the Leadership Question of the Day podcast, two other places you can go to invest in your leadership. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to you, Paul, for being so generous with your time, for sharing some great stories and some great leadership principles with us. It's been really rewarding. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
My absolute pleasure, Jonno, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity that you've given me, and I wish you all the very best, especially for the weeks coming up.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.